Cline. So if you haven't seen too much of the Hardened Scales deck, a lot of cards in it that you do not traditionally see in Affinity. Cards like Animation Module, Throne of Geth, Evolutionary Leap, and then, of course, 4 copies of Hardened Scales.
Right. Also, Arcbound Worker is a card that the stock builds of Affinity kind of left behind years ago. Was quite the standard player. But
yeah, it was in that version, and really we hadn't seen it since. And Egolf will be on the play here. A fetch and a cycling of Hollow One. And a Faithless Looting, seeing if we can get some Hollow Ones.
Yep, this would be the requisite 3 cards. And if there's a turn 1 Hollow One, that's going to be a bingo for me.
Let's get that out of the way.
Be a good way to start
and
that. Wow!
No, boom.
This match will have more turn 1s.
He did discard a Flamewake Phoenix.
Would have been perfect to go with this Hollow One.
Now Brandon Cline, see if he can get a good start here. It'll be a Forest and Ancient Stirrings.
That's an amusing element of the Hardened Scales deck. It's the only Ancient Stirrings deck where your Ancient Stirrings doesn't find your best card. You just can't pick up Hardened Scales with it.
So is that true in this? Is Hardened Scales the best card in this deck?
Yeah, you're really powering down a lot of what's happening in stock Affinity by going for Hardened Scales when you don't have Hardened Scales. You're missing out on having more 0-mana creatures, things like Signal Pest, things like Cranial Plating that are very low maintenance. When you do have that Hardened Scales, though, that's the prize. That's when your deck actually performs better.
So Brandon, his Ancient Stirrings finds him a Welding Jar, which he'll cast, and then casts a Mox Opal, but no third artifact, so just passes the turn for now.
A fine start. This sets up to have something like turn 2 Hardened Scales plus one of the 2 mana creatures in the deck.
Just a second land for Egolf. Neither deck really impressing all too much. We'll see what Brandon does on the second turn here. As we get Inkmoth Nexus, Arcbound Ravager. Now Metalcraft has been achieved, so Mox Opal's online. And he's going to tap it and make mana and immediately sacrifice it to the Arcbound Ravager to make, and then makes another Mox Opal, second mana, and Steel Overseer. Fancy, that one's going to work out pretty well, though.
Yeah, this is a fine start, certainly given the fact that Egolf's draw so far has been pretty anemic. Once you start activating that Inkmoth Nexus, firing up the Steel Overseer, you can make that lethal pretty quickly.
Yeah, now I was going to say the Hollow One deck is pretty light on removal, which it is, but Michael has some of it here. He uses Collective Brutality to shoot down Steel Overseer.
That was actually a very interesting decision point there for Brandon Cline. He could have chosen to sacrifice the Overseer to the Ravager or the Ravager to itself and pump the Overseer out of range. Given that Hollow One is a deck that has such little in the way of interaction, I kind of would be inclined to pick a line that puts the Inkmoth Nexus up to 5 as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And sacrificing the Ravager does kind of get you there. You just need one more counter, and you can just put all the counters on the Inkmoth Nexus. He's taking it slow, though. It looks like he's playing around Egolf having a Lightning Bolt on top of that Brutality.
Yeah, and he attacks Egolf down to 9 with that first Ravager hit. Going back over to Egolf's side, we're going to see a Goblin Lore. Drawing 4, discarding 3 at random. He hasn't got anything going yet. You see, we're going to discard another Goblin Lore and a Blackcleave Cliffs. And again, he's missed on Hollow Ones. I don't know if he even has a Gurmag Angler. This has just been a mess of a game from the Hollow One side.
Yeah, you're seeing kind of an example of the fail rate of the deck. Meanwhile, the Hardened Scales is not presenting its fastest possible draw, but it's more than enough to compete with something like this out of the Hollow One deck.
Yeah, I think this feels like the type of draw that out of Hardened Scales will frequently lose games, but Brandon's deck's really been forgiven by the fact that Michael's hasn't shown up at all.
Right. And from here, with the 2 Ravagers, I would like to see a shove on the Inkmoth Nexus for 5 on this turn.
Okay.
You can still maintain the Welding Jar on top of that. You can even get it up to 6 if you're concerned about something like a main deck Dismember.
Here's Inkmoth. Hangerback Walker up to 2.
Actually, we might have the full 10 on this turn. Yeah, we have 2 Ravagers. The Hangerback Walker is going to make 2 more artifacts. This very well is already, this is already lethal.
So I'm going to count it out here. So what happens there, we tap the Hangerback Walker. You have the Arcbound Ravager stacks. You saw 5 counters on the Arcbound Ravagers. You can sacrifice the 2 Thopters. That's 6, 7 counters. Sacrifice the Welding Jar up to 8 counters. And when you sacrifice a Ravager to a Ravager, that's 9. And then the last one, then you have 9 counters on the Ink Moth, so that's 10.
Yeah, I mean, sacrificing Ravager to Ravager just gives you 2 free counters, right? You have Modular plus an artifact, and the Ravager also already had a starting point, so looked like more than enough from where I was sitting.
And looks like that from both players, they agree. So Brandon Cline takes the first game here with Hardened Scales, and we now move over to the sideboards.
Yeah, on Egolf's side, for our Hollow One player, we have 3 Ancient Grudge. That one's not bad.
There you go.
3 Leyline of the Void. That card actually has some implications against Hardened Scales, as they are relying a little bit more on cards going to the graveyard.
Yeah, we're specifically looking at Arcbound Ravager, Arcbound Worker, Hangerback Walker, and actually, that's it, but that certainly is enough.
Yeah, that's a good spread. You know, I'm not super keen on Leyline of the Void, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see it. I know that Rest in Peace frequently comes in against this deck out of the controlling decks. We have a couple Blood Moon, a couple Grim Lavamancer, a Big Game Hunter, a Collective Brutality, and Engineered Explosives, a Fatal Push, and a Slagstorm. So this lean stuff, the Explosives, the Fatal Push, I like that a good amount. Definitely like the Ancient Grudge. Could see the argument for the Leyline of the Void. The Grim Lavamancer, the Big Game Hunter, this stuff isn't the worst either.
Yeah, well, against traditional Affinity, Grim Lavamancer is a pretty good card. Because there aren't Vault Scourges and Signal Pests hanging out, does it become worse here?
It does. If you don't have it on turn 1 as well, it can be pretty tough to actually hit a Steel Overseer with the Lavamancer. And then once that's active, you're running into all kinds of problems.
Now on Brandon's side, he's got 4 Damping Spheres, 4 Nature's Claims, 2 Dismember, 2 Surgical Extraction, a second copy of Evolutionary Leap, a Grafdigger's Cage, and a Karn, Scion of Urza.
I think the big find here are those 2 Dismembers. They can cover Hollow One, they can cover Gurmag Angler. That generally makes it pretty difficult for the Hollow One player to close. The Grafdigger's Cage is pretty reasonable. There's a good amount of stuff jumping out of the graveyard in the Hollow One deck. Your Bloodghast, your Flamewake Phoenix, Flashing Back, Faithless Looting is also a thing that stops. Mostly I'm just looking at Dismember. I suppose Surgical Extraction also kind of plays. For the most part, though, the Hardened Scales deck is kind of winning on the battlefield. This isn't a deck that's going to just destroy you because the graveyard's a little bit better. If you're doing your thing, you're kind of already better on the battlefield, so I wouldn't go too heavy on graveyard hate.
Sure. Now, if you missed our action from yesterday, you can check all this out on our YouTube page, youtube.com/StarCityGames. We have all full event recaps of all our rounds of play from previous events. We also have our Versus Series, Flashback, and Best of the SCG Tour. You can find all that over at StarCityGames.com, or YouTube.com, rather, Star City Games. Now, I know you were saying before, Grafdigger's Cage in this matchup is your thoughts as far as how good it is?
Yeah, it turns off a few things. So the one thing that is likable about it, especially over the Surgical Extraction, is at least it's an artifact. It plays with Arcbound Ravager.
Yeah. So the main things it turns off are Bloodghast and Flamewake Phoenix.
Right. This is not a matchup where you're probably losing a lot to Flashback Faithless Looting, but we saw 3 Ancient Grudge.
Yeah.
Those had to be cast out of the hand to deal with something like Grafdigger's Cage, so that's another reasonable element that it covers.
We see Flamewake Blade Adept, and here is that turn 1 Grafdigger's Cage that Brandon has the one of. We'll see how much work it does.
Yeah, don't mind that.
Now, of course, Michael has one of those 3 grudges in his hand. Not going to matter as much.
Right. Even still, though, you directed Ancient Grudge to Grafdigger's Cage. Then maybe you can set up Steel Overseer plus Welding Jar and hope that there's no more interaction for that.
Second Flameblade Adept. And a swing from Egolf. He has a copy of Burning Inquiry in hand, but it looks like he's choosing to wait a turn before casting it so that it can pump both these adepts.
Yep, I'm a big fan of that. And given the Hardened Scales version of Affinity being present here, Flamebladed F has Menace. It's way less likely that Brandon produces 2 blockers on this turn, so both of the adepts should be able to connect on the following turn.
Brandon's turn 2 here is Hangerback Walker and Mox Opal. He passes. Brandon... That's something interesting, Ryan. I saw 2 basic forests in his hand. This is actually tell me more about this. This is a 6 basic forest deck?
Yep. So when it comes to traditional Affinity, they sometimes run 1, 2 basic lands. Your Multicolor lands are a little bit better. You want a lot of creature lands. When it comes to Hardened Scales, you have to be able to cast Hardened Scales. You have to be able to cast your Ancient Stirrings, which you play 4 copies of as well, which just means that you have to play a lot more forests.
Yeah, I see actually here only 2 copies of Blinkmoth Nexus.
Right.
Yeah, so 6 creature lands.
Yeah, and Blinkmoth Nexus is quite a bit worse than Inkmoth Nexus in this deck. When this
Sure.
deck's actually doing its thing, the amount of regular damage it deals tends to be really high. You end up with creatures with 5 or more +1/+1 counters on them. Switching that over to Blinkmoth Nexus is kind of whatever. At least Inkmoth Nexus is kind of a double strike creature.
So Faithless Looting from Egolf and Cycling Street Wraith. That's going to pump both Adepts 3 times. This is a swing for 8. Brandon will drop down to 11.
And a 3rd Adept. This is really scary going into the following turn.
Jackal Aggro.
And there's still that Inquiry in hand, right?
Yeah, that looks looking pretty lethal, isn't it?
Right.
Now, Brandon has, I believe, a Walking Ballista in hand. I don't think he can make it any larger than a 2/2 here.
Yeah, it would take some Hardened Scales, some shenanigans to do that. Just 4 mana available here, no scales.
Egolf actually in his hand, Ryan, has a Faithless Looting and Burning Inquiry. So he's just going for, 1-drops and giant growths, it looks like.
With the combination of Faithless Looting and Inquiry, if you start with the Looting, that means you'll always have the Inquiry at the end.
Exactly.
+5, that makes just 2 Adepts lethal. That means you need 4 blockers to stop that.
They're all 6s, so that'd be 18 damage here.
Now, if Cline deploys Ballista on 2, and those creatures are maintained, he can make a double block and then fire the Ballista at the other Adept. But given this hand, he's going to need to do that or something that covers that much.
And the problem with that play, I mean, you're right, it keeps him alive. The part that I don't like is that then that double block doesn't actually remove the creature it's blocking.
You kill nothing in combat. You end up just getting one of the Jackals because your Ballista fires it down. And then you also don't have the mana to charge your Hangerback Walker. So you're just left with a Thopter, just a single Thopter.
And that's going to be the play, Ballista and a pass from Cline. Draw here from Egolf is going to start with Faithless Looting. So yeah, these creatures are going to pump up to 3/3s. Oh, he found another Burning Inquiry. There is a world in which he casts all the things. If he can be left with Land Inquiry after the Inquiry, he can go a 3rd time.
So that would be pumping for 8 on all of the creatures. You're still not lethal on 1 Adept.
So here's Burning Inquiry. Both players draw 3, discard 3 at random. I guess if that's the case, you may as well just hold it.
Right. Yeah, you see he doesn't deploy the land beforehand. You're still pretty fine discarding the lands.
So they're all going to be 6/2s at the end when things are said and done. Brandon's hand was not great either. He had a Walking Ballista and 2 forests. Choosing 3 cards to discard looks like a Brutality and a Burning Inquiry and a land hit the bin for Egolf. But here are 3 6-power creatures. And actually, Brandon's hand appears to have been improved by the collective by this Burning Inquiry. We'll look at it more in a bit.
It looks like for Egolf, he was stuck with Flamewake Phoenix in hand, and he had the land where he could have activated it if it did go to the graveyard. It didn't.
And here's the play we were talking about, the double block and shoot. So Brandon's going to go down to 5. Walking Ballista, unfortunately, does not trade with the other Adept, just dies in combat. Brandon gets a Thopter. He's got a lot of work to do to clean this one up.
Yep. Though, from here, Egolf doesn't have a fistful of Burning Inquiries anymore. He can flashback Faithless Looting, and that does make the combination of Adepts lethal on the following turn. Actually, Cage turns that off, so he's just kind of plucking in for 1 apiece on those.
Yeah. I was going to say, all it would actually take for Brandon to stabilize from here, at the moment, another walking Ballista would buy him some time. It looks like he's going to make 2 creatures, and he's just going to kind of hope that Michael stops having these 1-mana red cards.
It's very unlikely that Egolf can make both Adepts lethal in the following turn.
Yeah, he would need a Goblin Lore.
Right.
So I guess it's not too big of an ask.
Well, Goblin Lore is just 3
cards.
No,
it's draws 4.
Draw 4.
Discards 3.
Yeah. So it would need to be like Street Wraith in the Goblin Lore.
So, okay, so we're looking at 2 cards.
Right.
I mean, it's possible Michael's deck can do this, but it's not a guarantee to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the top card had to be Street Wraith, and the next card would have to be Goblin Lore. We know he just has Flamewake Phoenix in hand from here.
Agreed. Arcbound Ravager currently a 1/1. If Brandon wants to just block with it in combat and have the Ravager survive, He certainly has a free Mox Opal he can sacrifice. I don't know. I don't see another artifact that I'm too excited about sacrificing outside of that. I guess we'll see how this attack plays out.
Yeah, you're probably not too keen on sacrificing the Graph Digger's Cage.
No, that graveyard has multiple Flamewake Phoenix and a Faithless Looting in it. Now, what Egolf could start doing is just casting Phoenixes from hand if he has them.
Yeah, that's well and good for now. You know, that Thopter, I'd be pretty surprised to see the Arcbound Ravager just pump up the Thopter.
Yeah.
But you can just make a chump block for now.
Do you think is it safe for Brandon to go to 3 here and just let the damage come in?
I don't know if I want to leave myself dead to the Lightning Bolt. I'd probably make a chump block with the Thopter on this turn and then sacrifice the Thopter to Ravager.
Yeah, Egolf's a 4-bolt deck. There's no chance they're in the sideboard, are there?
No, not against a Steel Overseer deck, right?
I wouldn't think so.
Got to make sure you can tag that one. And Cline, you can see in the deck list how much he cares about untapping with Steel Overseer. Brought 3 welding jars to the table.
Yeah, so if he doesn't... So here's a swing with both Adepts. They both have Menace, so at least 1 damage will get through. Some interesting decisions here on Cline's side. I think I see what's going on, Ryan, which is I believe Michael has Grim Lavamancer in hand, so he's really trying to get Cline to 4. And then from there, like, it'll be 2 turns to lethal.
Yeah.
It's unlikely Brandon can stop that. He'll have to try to race it, and that's reasonably difficult. So Brandon double blocks the Adept with Ravager and Thopter.
Yeah, so with only 3 blockers, one of the Adepts does connect. And then, yeah, Lavamaster lethal in 2. Cline is playing a full set of Walking Ballista and a full set of Ancient Stirrings.
Okay.
That is really what he would be drawing to, though.
And Brandon's got a decision to make here. The 1/2 Flameblade Adept. On the board, Brandon, the best play is sacrifice the Thopter to the Ravager. The Thopter's being ordered first. Just let the Ravager win in combat, move on. Brandon, I think, is deciding if he wants more to happen. And now he actually let the Thopter trade without sacrificing it. Can you tell me more about that play?
It looks like he's giving respect to some removal spell. The idea is that if you sacrifice the thing to a Ravager and then a Lightning Bolt shows up on the Ravager, then you're kind of in a situation where you have to force a lot of action on the Ravager that you weren't looking to have happen on this turn.
Yeah, if you're playing on specifically Lightning Bolt, my worry would be you just went to 4. Are you beating it anyway?
Yeah,
but you think maybe he can?
4's higher than 3. You know.
Yeah,
you didn't leave yourself dead to it.
Okay, so we're saying yes, we can.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible from here. He'll be on tapping with Hangerback Walker. He has the Ravager. Pretty good at setting up some blocks. There's still those 2 creature lands. So even in terms of flying creatures or menace creatures, he has a good amount of material once he starts untapping with this mana.
Yeah, and Michael's hand is Flameblade Phoenix and Lavamancer. He actually goes for the post-combat Phoenix now that the Thopter is gone, choosing that over Grim Lavamancer.
It seems to me that
it's the same clock for both.
The Phoenix is a lot weaker against this combination of Blink Moth, Ink Moth Nexus.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Both of them are 0 damage this turn, 2 next turn, 2 the following turn. I think I would have rather gone with the 1-drop.
Well, the Grim Lavamaster, if it doesn't get ballisted, is 2 damage next turn. The Phoenix is forced to chump block next turn.
Yeah, I was thinking best case scenarios, right? And the Lavamancer is a much safer play.
And the thing about the things that are good against Lavamancer is literally Ballista. And if Ballista shows up, you're probably not winning this game anyway. And here's an animation module for Brandon. This is a fun one.
All right, so whenever I got this one from Kaladesh Limited. Whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, get a servo. That works real nicely with Arcbound Ravager, and we're going to see some of that in play.
Yeah, once you get into a situation where you're safely activating these things, you have some mana floating, you make servos, that's going to check the Flameblade Adept very easily.
Yeah. For example, with 2 mana up here, Brandon already has the ability to tap Walking Ballista or Hangerback Walker to itself, get a 1, put a 1 counter on it, make a servo.
Yep.
Arcbound Ravager will swing, and this is where the math in Hardened Scales gets real fun.
So let's just look at what's available on the table. There's 3 artifacts there, creature land that can activate itself. That would be 4. Or we can actually just use that to pump the Hangerback Walker instead. We can get an animation module creature here with an activation. I think we're quite a bit shy of 15, but a lot of damage can come across anyway.
So Ravager swings in. We do have Hangerback activation, paying 1 to make a servo. Sacrificing Walker to put a counter onto Ravager, gets 2 Thopters. And you're saying, yeah, you didn't think that Phoenix was worth damage, and it certainly looks that way right now.
Yeah, plenty of blockers available.
Now the math part. Here's a swing for 2. With this animation module going, it looks so many artifacts were just made. I mean, Ryan, it feels like we're looking at Inkmoth being lethal next turn.
And it looks like this is a situation where you could have cast the Lava Master on the previous turn, and then this turn, post-combat, if you drew a land, cast the Flamewake Phoenix, leave that back as a blocker for the Inkmoth Nexus.
Yeah.
And you use your land to activate the Grim Lava Mancer, and then you have lethal in the following turn. Meanwhile, the Phoenix is just engaging in combat where it's going to get blocked.
So we see from Brandon, he's rearranged the blocks. He was debating trading with the Phoenix, but now has changed his mind. He's going to chump block the Phoenix and double block the Adept. He'll lose both all those tokens he made last turn, but takes care of the Jackal. Arcbound Ravager will go ahead and eat the Thopter in the air, and he stays at 4. No blockers on Michael's side. I haven't counted it out yet, but 13 does not feel like a safe place for Michael right now.
Well, 0 poison's also not a safe place.
Yeah. Brandon draws.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Well,
no. Okay.
Neither of those numbers are safe at all.
Now it's fun. Hardened scales. Okay, if you get one L1 counter, you get an extra one. Get ready. This is going to be nice.
I mean,
and by that I mean he's probably just dead.
I counted the Infect was already lethal, and now we're in a
now it's really
situation
lethal?
where just regular damage is lethal as well. That Grim Lava Mancer should block. Activating Hangerback Walker will give it 2 counters here. You can activate the animation module, sacrifice the Hangerback Walker. You get 3 bonus Thopters. That initial sacrifice on the Walker puts your Ravager up to 5 already. Then you just have 3 more artifacts. That's plus 6. Just 1 more artifact already gets you to 13.
All right.
I mean,
so
if
we're
you
going to walk me through it here.
Sure. So Hardened Scales, and you activate Hangerback Walker.
All right, it's at 3.
So it goes from 1 to 3. Your Arcbound Ravager sacrifices Hangerback Walker. Ravager goes from 3 to 5. You get 3 Thopters.
Okay, so it gets 1 extra because we're adding 1 for everything. Hardened scales.
Sacrifice your 3 Thopters for 2 counters each. Your Ravager goes from 5 to 7 to 9 to 11. One more artifact gets you to 13.
Each artifact is double pumping, and this Hangerback is 4 artifacts. That's 8. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. When you have Hardened Scales, somebody's dead.
Yeah, and they're dead. They're dead by a mile, aren't they? This isn't even close. You see an attack with Flamewake Phoenix, and we're gonna see the other ability of Animation Module. If a 3 tap, choose a counter on target permanent to give them another, or 2 more because we play Hardened Scales. So now Hangerback will be at 5. We'll sacrifice it to Ravager. It gets 2 counters. Then we get 5 Thopters. We block with all 5 Thopters. Yeah, he said I was looking for 5 tokens. There were 3. These are the 3 that are left over. Then we go back to Cline.
From this point on that turn, Cline could just make a block, sacrifice to Ravager. He could make the trade like he did. It doesn't really matter. Pretty convincingly going to win this game.
Steel Overseer. Sure.
Little still had all these moment, I think.
And Brandon putting on a show. Here's a swing for 7. And sacrifice that. Let's make it 9 damage from the Opal. Oh, well. Animation module means time to get a servo. We'll pay 1 for that. Sacrifice that servo for 2 more counters. Make it 11 damage. And 1 more artifact should take care of things. How about activate that Blink Moth? Sacrifice it. Let's make it 13. Michael cycles Hollow One and picks up the cards. So Brandon Cline is your one undefeated player here with Hardened Scales, putting on a show.
Man.